Hey everyone, thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to be here. My name is Azizi, and I am with Degreed. I manage our business development. And let me get this. I'll give them a second. Do I need to? Oh, well, there's my LinkedIn photo. And there it is again. Okay, so now that I've got that taken care of. So I am with Degreed, and I manage our business development. I'm actually here today to talk about an idea that's pretty core to Degreed's founding, which is that of lifelong learning. It's this concept that learning doesn't just end at the end of our academic learning, but it is and should be a lifelong endeavor, and Degreed exists to allow that. And before I get started, I'll give a really quick intro to Degreed. We are very much in the enterprise learning space. We're an enterprise learning solution that allows corporations and their employees to find, track, measure all of the ways in which we learn. I think while many of the concepts that are the research that I'll talk about, it has to do with this corporate learning space. I think what's important to keep in mind, as Lisa mentioned, is that the way that we think about how employees learn today in the workforce is actually not that distinct from how individuals today, or you and I, students, adults, learn. So what we see in the workforce very much models how we as individuals are learning. And with that, so I'll talk about a few topics today. How we learn as individuals and employees today in the workforce, why it's important to keep learning in order to stay competitive in the changing nature of the workforce, and then just in terms of trends that we're seeing, how we can keep up. Again, as I talk about how workers learn, and that's something that we have done a lot of research on, I actually think this is not that distinct from how individuals learn. And if we take a step back and take a look at you and I, how we learn today, we traditionally probably think of learning as formal courses or the prescriptive learning that we have to do. But if we think about how we learn in our daily lives, I think we'll in fact see that learning happens all the time. It's in informal ways, right? So as an example, when we talk about how we learn as an organization at Degreed, we find that it's things like the reading of articles you do as you're drinking your morning coffee. It's standing in line somewhere and finding articles or videos through your social sites. And so that leads us to this idea of there's been an explosion of content on the web. And we've seen this, I think, for over the last few years. We started in 2012, and I think since then we've seen just an explosion of content, and really in the ed tech space in general since 2012. There's, as it says, over 1,000 providers of e-learning content on the web. Many of those are freely accessible, it's open source, it's available at our fingertips, it's mobile, it's microlearning, so we're seeing that learning is now in smaller and smaller incremental pieces, and it's available for us to use in our daily lives. And if we also think about what we do when we as individuals need to learn something, and that might be for our jobs or otherwise, we often Google it. We go to Google, we do a search, we learn what we need to learn, and then we move on. We go to YouTube, we find a video, we learn what we need to learn. And it can be about anything. It might be how to cook. It might be something that you need to know for your job. But we go to Google or to YouTube to find these answers, we get them quickly, and we move on. And so what this leads us to is this, I'm showing here a bit of the research that Degreed has done on how the workforce learns. And what this research told us is that it's not just through those formal ways, it's actually through many informal ways, like reading articles or watching videos. And the data tells us that something like 85% of workers will go to online search in order to learn something at least once a week. Right, so at that far corner there, you'll see that live classes, which is what we might often think of when we think of at least corporate learning, is only about once a year. So when we actually need to learn things, we're going to online search. About 70% of us go to reading blogs and articles or learning from peers. And then about 50% of us go to videos. And that's at least once a week. So why is all this important? I think inevitably, when we talk about our education, we talk about where we went to university. We talk about our academic credential, or that we don't have one. And that is very reflective, we think, of the problems in how we measure lifelong learning. We don't capture what happens after your academic credentials. And yet it's not a comprehensive view of all of your learning throughout your lifetime. We might be 5, 10, 20 years removed from the BA you received from XYZ university. That does not, though, mean that you have not been learning. So we need better tools to track that learning that you're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And to give an example here, I joined Degreed with no background in corporate learning. So for me, it was a totally new space. I actually came from finance at an investment bank. So I really had no background in corporate learning. And I had to do a lot to upskill in that space and really familiarize myself. And that was through things like reading articles, of course, but attending corporate learning conferences. I also found myself in a role where I was working with a enterprise technology product, and coming from a bank had no background in that. And I took a web development boot camp from General Assembly. And that was one of the ways that I sort of familiarized myself with that topic area. It took me 12 weeks and was both in person and online. And that was one of the ways that I learned what I needed to know for my job. But I was also complementing that with articles, videos, and so on. And so the point here is that we are learning in these various ways to get the knowledge we need for our jobs, for our school, for our personal lives. And we need better ways to track and get recognition for that. So I don't think that I think lifelong learning is important because we want to be our best selves. But I also think that in today's environment, it's also critical to how we progress in the workforce, to how we get and obtain jobs. And I think learning today is how we will stay competitive in today's workforce. And in a recent study that was done by Brandon Hall Group, about 2/3 of learning and development professionals inside corporations said that they think employees need to seek and engage with learning resources at least once a week in order to be effective at their jobs. And here's a quote that it was, I think, in an article recently. The CEO of AT&T said that we as individuals need to be learning 5 to 10 hours a week in order to be effective and not become obsolete. And he also said that we do need to retool ourselves, and we shouldn't expect this to change. So I think the takeaway here is that learning is likely already, but also needs to be and should be a daily habit, if not a weekly habit, as it already is. And I think what's important here is that it's not just on us as individuals to upskill and to continue learning. I think it's also the responsibility of corporations to provide us with the learning and the resources that we need to gain the skills to do our jobs well. And I think that if corporations who don't offer that to today's workforce will soon not be employers of choice. So I think this is very much something that we look for in our jobs today. One of the things that I want to touch on today, because I think there's a lot of, when we attend these sessions, we also want to take actionable items away from them around how we can make this happen. And to that point, I think what we're seeing in the workforce are a couple of trends. One is learning is becoming available in smaller chunks. So it's no longer that courses are the only way to learn, even online courses. There are also shorter form videos that we can watch to learn what we need, blogs, articles, and so on. So what we're seeing is actually that there's just been this explosion of content on the web. So another trend is the curation of that learning into forms that can be easily digestible. And I think that speaks to a big point of what needs to happen for us to continue learning in the workforce and as individuals today. And curation is just that process of going through vast amounts of content and being able to contextualize it, to create some organization around it, and to tie it back to a topic or to a skill. And I think somebody mentioned earlier as we got started that you didn't know that there was this content available and it's based on topic. And this is very much something that we're seeing today, that our learning needs to be tied back to skills and competencies so that we as individuals know if we are seeking to learn particular skills to advance ourselves, we need to know how to gain that content and make sense of what is this content overload today. There's many tools to do this. I think many forms of content today, providers of content, allow for learning to be curated. And I think one key trend that we're seeing is great learning exists on the web. It's really about being able to bring it together in a form that we can digest and that I think can be tracked and measured. So Degreed is just one tool to do this, but there are many. We treat it as bringing together learning from a variety of providers, from a variety of forms of delivery, whether those are podcasts or events or courses. And I think the key is being able to tie it back to the skills or competencies that we want to be gaining. And just to bring it back, I think we're seeing that not only is lifelong learning important, it's also keys to how we stay competitive and relevant in the workforce. And I think this quote sort of brings it all together. I think there's a recognition from today's employers and learning and development leaders that learning does happen in shorter form ways. I think there's a recognition that learning in our personal lives is bleeding into our work lives. And we have called this the bring your own learning trend, which is essentially the consumerization of learning in the workforce. It used to be that we saw the consumerization of IT as we were bringing phones into the workforce and saying, we want to make this work. Let's use our personal devices in the workforce. And I think I can personally attest to this, the transition from having separate work and personal devices to just having your personal device operate in both worlds. And today I think we're seeing the same thing with learning. Bring your own learning means you bring the same learning resources you use in your personal life, likely through mobile devices, into the workplace. And then I'm going to end today with a part of our manifesto at Degreed. I think this is sort of key to the opening that Lisa provided around jailbreaking the degree. And it is that the challenges of the future won't care how you became an expert, just that you did and that you made a difference. And with that, I think if you have any questions, I'd be happy to connect with you. I think there's a meet and greet later on. So I'll end here and with a couple minutes to go and connect with you during the Q&A. So thank you.